First of all, I do apologize if you hear any vibrational noises or if you will. That'll be like notifications coming in, so I do apologize about that in advance. Now, let's talk about something that, I've been a fan of. And obviously, I'm not the only person that's a fan of this trope. And that is the shape-shifting, but mostly the female shape-shifting. And I say that with all due respect, no offense. And it's something that people like Trouble TRO, Joven16, Desi Arts, if you will, Mr. Internet Man, and and various others, notable others, have always implemented into the stories or the little comic strips or web comics or what have you. And it's no surprise why basically, they would go with the female protagonist to have these powers. Either it's just one female or two. Because as I've alluded to before in some audio podcasts, if you will, audio videos on YouTube, I have said that basically, and I even typed this up. I think I typed this up somewhere as well. The reason they go with them is because, despite how you might feel about this, and again, I say it with all due respect, no offense, but the reason they go with them is because the female mindset is more mischievous, more innovative, more imaginative, and more, I guess you could say, inquisitive about what they can do, when it comes to changing their shape, becoming whoever or whatever they can think of. And that is why when you see some of the videos out there, if you will, not just videos, but some of the web comics, if you will, that's why you see this always being put into play, because mainly it's showcasing the female protagonist in the role with these powers, coming up with more creative, and that's the other word I was looking for, more creative ideas of what they can do with their powers. I mean, Mr. Internet Man, basically, and he's not the only one. I think even Laboratory does this with his Emily Sanders character and a few others. But basically, they take their characters, like Mr. Internet Man's Demonica Veronica character and Laboratory's Emily Sanders character, and essentially not only give them shape-shifting powers, but also allow them to use those shape-shifting powers not only to become anyone or anything, but to split themselves in two, maybe multiples, if you will, of themselves. But when it comes to, let's say, Mr. Internet Man, and again, I don't know if Laboratory will ever do this with the Emily Sanders character, but with Mr. Internet Man's character of Demonica Veronica, not only is she able to do this, but she's also able to become different individual personalities. Like, she basically creates these new identities who know where they're from or who knew how they came about, but act on their own accord. And there are multiple stories he's done on his DeviantArt page that prove that, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think when we really get down to it, there has to be, a reasoning. Like, there has to be, a beginning, an origin, or at least something or someone, character-wise, that, made this or helped make this trope popular, to the point that it gets utilized even today. And the one character I can think of is Cutie Honey. That's right. Cutie Honey, or Honey Karazaga, I think, or Honey, I'll just call it that way. I'll just go by that, because that's her name outside the Cutie Honey persona. But Cutie Honey is a great example of that, because she is looked at as one of the, if not the, I guess you could say, godmothers, if you will, grandmothers, if you will, of, the not only the magical girl perspective, but also the shape-shifting magical girl. Because her powers, basically, and the way she uses her powers is like a little I guess you could say a little heart color, a little heart handkerchief, a heart necklace, or a neckband, or whatever it is. It allows her to change into anyone she needs to change into. Now, what's interesting about the Cutie Honey character is she's an android. She's a humanoid android, mind you, but she's part android. And what that means is being a humanoid, if you will. What that means is she's pretty much flesh and blood like the rest of us, but she also has some cybernetics inside of her to where basically wearing the collar, the collar with the heart on it, allows her to, I guess you could say, infuse those shape-shifting powers to become anyone she needs to become. Now, I know you might say, well, that sounds more like being in disguises. And it is. It is more sounding like that. I do agree with you. But the reason I say she's kind of in that Godmother mode of being one of the foundations of the shape-shifting magical girl perspective, where, again, what I've mentioned at the beginning is going on even as we speak, is basically when the anime and the manga would get revamped for newer generations, because it originally started in the 70s, the early 70s, and throughout the various decades would get a revamp. It saw a revamp in the 80s, it saw a revamp in the 90s, the one I know of. Well, I think it's the 90s, late 90s, and the 2000s. The late 90s, 2000s one is the one I know about the most. That's how I found out. But yeah, you got a revamp around the 90s, more so of a revamp in the 2000s, and then got another revamp, I think, in the 2010s, the early portion, and then it got a recent revamp in the 2020s. So it's had various different incarnations, basically following the same formula that it did originally. But what's interesting about the later ones from the late 90s, but mostly 2000s up to now. And I don't know about the 80s. Let me know in the comments if anything like this happened in the 80s revamps. But basically in the 2000s up to now revamps of Cutie Honey, not only have they kept her whole shapeshift into another, persona, disguise-wise intact, but they also included a few other elements. And those other elements is to disguise herself as a statue if she has to. Yeah. Because you see, in the Cutie Honey that I know of, that I got introduced to in the 2000s, there was an episode to where they're trying to catch this gold thief, who's a monster of the week, of course. They're trying to catch her, and the one way to do it is to lure her into a trap with basically not only some real gold and stuff, but also a big voodoo statue, female voodoo statue, that would, stand out, that she would take notice of because, it's, like I said, stand outish, if you will. And that Buddha statue, female one, was Cutie Honey. And you could tell this because of the fact that she was kind of reacting a little bit to, the female villain, kind of licking her body, because essentially Honey was naked in this form. She has to be, and that's the one thing about some of her forms. She has to be totally naked if she goes and does the statuesque forms, if you will. So yeah, she had to do that, and that was, again, part of a trap that her and her friends laid out for this thief, and her friends were hidden underneath the table or whatever she had set up under them to hide in while she posed as a statue. Another example is in the more recent one. Basically, she's running low on power, because one of the things about her shape-shifting, her collar, if you will, is and her power in general, because like I say, she's part android, is she needs time to recharge. She needs time to rest and recharge, kind of get some rest, some Z's, whatever. So what does she do? She's getting pursued by one of the villains, henchmen, or hench monsters, if you will. And she's running, And she has to figure out what can I do to not only recharge so I can get my power back up to where it needs to be, but to also basically, lose this monster from chasing me and everything. So what happens is she notices they're in a park area and there's a pedestal. And what she does is she decides, okay, I know of one way. And she uses what's left of her power, or at least the collar, if you will, for that time before it recharges, to basically shapeshift herself into a statue on the pedestal. And she remains that way all throughout the night and into the day. And what's interesting about the animation for that part is they show the transformation happening, but after it's done, it becomes kind of like a solid background. Basically you watch some of the cartoons and what seems to be animated at first, like when a phone gets picked up and then put back down, it turns, kind of solidified, becomes part of the background. That's essentially what happened with her in the animation area. But yeah, she remained that way until the next morning when two of her colleagues started to kind of grope on her a little bit because, they thought, oh, it's a statue of honey, okay, and basically she had to just wake up all of a sudden out of her, slumber, if you will, and let them know, hey, knock it off. So yeah, she, over the past, I think, 15 years, I should say, not 15 years, but in the past 20 years and everything, the past 20 years, basically has, and I'm just checking outside my window, there's a kid riding his scooter. Basically, he was riding up our driveway the other day, and my mom had to talk to his mom about it, and everything, so he doesn't hurt himself. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying, in the past 20 years or so, this has been an addition to her character so that, she can do more than just, shapeshift into a different womanly disguise, because some of the womanly disguises that she would take on in the past and current incarnations of the series is she could be a flight attendant. She could be a equestrian, horse rider or Christian racer. She can be a F1 driver. She can be a secretary, or sometimes, and she's done this in some of the incarnations, I believe, she can be a BDMS mistress or even slave. And that's a fact. But I think over time, the people behind the show, the show, or the various shows, if you will, animes and mangas, have realized that they need to do more with her powers than just, oh, she's going to wear it as a disguise. And I think basically having her become, a statue, a voodoo-like statue in the late 90s, early to mid 2000s version was a great start. And then continuing that on with a more recent version is even better. Now, obviously, she also has a power to disguise, some friends and allies as inanimate objects, for the safety, which I'm sure she also has that power as well. So, why show that power and everything, if you will? Why show that power, if you will? Basically, if you're not going to have her utilize it, not just on her friends and allies, but on herself as well. And again, I do apologize if I sound like I was a little distracted. Again, I'm just watching the neighbor's kid walking around and make sure he doesn't, do anything he might regret or he might hurt himself with. But anyway, like I said, if they're giving her that power in the most recent versions, I should say, to use on her friends, family, and allies, then obviously she has to be using it on herself. So let me know, guys, in the comments if she does do that. But I think what this means for Cutie Honey in the future is those that continue to revamp, the franchise and the character for new generations. I think what that means is eventually they're going to be like, okay, she shapeshifts into different people, different women, with different occupations. she now can also shapeshift into statues and all that to try to trap a villain or try to recharge and everything in case, she can't get back to, her home in time to do so. I think over time, and I'm sure people are already thinking about this that are working on the next incarnation, that maybe what they need to do is take it a step further and have her shapeshift not just into different people as well as into statues, but also maybe into different objects, into different objects that I think, would really make it more interesting. Like, can you imagine if she touches her collar and says, okay, I'm going to shapeshift into a motorcycle? She could do that, and then one of her friends could ride her, could ride her literally, but not in the way that they would dream of riding her, if you catch my drift. But yeah, I think over time, the more this franchise gets revamped and continued or rebooted, I think the more they're going to start adding on to that repertoire of shapeshifting when it comes to Cutie Honey. Now, I know Cutie Honey's not the only one, of course. I mean, I've talked about this before. You had the marvelous VENMO, but her thing was she would either shapeshift into an older version of herself, or she would shapeshift into a younger version, or, because if it had to deal with animals and all that, she would shapeshift into different animals. I mean, heck, the intro has her becoming a doe towards the end of it, and her, trotting off with a male deer, buck, if you will, with a big heart in front of it, like she's basically in love. This is what she's going to do from now on. But yeah, Marvelous VENMO is, the other godmother of it as well, and I appreciate that, because it shows that there's more, I should say, that can be done. But the way she does it is she takes two different pills to make the effects happen, one way or another. But I think if you were to ask anybody who they feel is like the godmother of this magical girl shape-shifting trope that gets utilized today, through stories like Pink Benefits by Trouble TRO, Nano Shift by Joven 16, and so on, Desi Arts with Metamorphosized to Malleability, and so on, and Grape Pythenia with What Dreams May Become. If you were to ask them, who is the godmother, the foundation, the true foundation, all fingers and all answers would point to Cutie Honey. And that's a fact. That's a fact. So yeah, to me, Honey Karazagi, and I pronounced that, and I did butcher that last name wrong, so I do apologize. But Cutie Honey in general, in my opinion, I look at as one of the godmothers, if not the godmother of this trope. That's how I see it. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment below, live chat during the premiere if you haven't already. Like the video, ring the bell for notification for future content. Also, subscribe to the channel, helps me out in a big way, guys. Also, go down to the description and click on the links to the Teespring store. Get yourself some merchandise you can't get anywhere else, especially in time for the fall. Also, guys, check out the other places where you can find my content from Odyssey.com at BWRoses, at Rumble.com at BWRoses, at DeviantArt.com at BVW1979. Also, check me out at VENMO at BWRoses. Also, check me out at all your favorite audio podcast affiliates like iHeartRadio, iTunes, Pandora, Spotify for podcasters, Radio Public, Audible, you name it. If it has a podcast, there's a good chance that I am on there. Or at least I'm one of the podcasts you can find. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are. Comment below. And until then, I will talk to y'all later. And I am out.